Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Volume 1 of Kaplan's GRE Grudge Match. My name is Boris, and I'm joined here today by my friend and colleague, Teresa. Now, if you've ever looked at the Kaplan website or read the blog, it may seem as though we present a unified front and agree on everything. Well, that's not the case, and today we're going to give you the insider look. With respect to the question, does the on-screen calculator make the GRE easier or harder for students, I'm going to argue that it actually makes the test easier. And Teresa's going to argue that it depends. Now, Teresa, would you like the first word or the last word in today's discussion?
I'm going to be gracious and give you the first word today, Boris.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Teresa. You didn't even have to do that, but you did. The 5-minute timer is going now. Okay. We've written a lot of blog entries and talked at length. In fact, I've written some of those entries about how the calculator can be a trap on the GRE, and that's certainly true. However, the GRE does contain a lot of very pesky arithmetic, in which when you do the work by hand, it is possible to make small mistakes, and the calculator can make that arithmetic faster if it's really obnoxious, and it can reduce the potential for error. If you do mess up, you can, well, retype things into the calculator, and it's not that big of a deal. So while the calculator does offer some students a chance to trip, it also provides a really helpful tool that overall makes the GRE easier for the well-prepared. Now, Teresa, what do you say to that?
I have a lot of things to say to that, actually. You gave me just a lot of good points to respond to here, so thank you for it.
You're welcome.
The first thing you mentioned, first thing you were talking about there was traps. Mm-hmm. And yes, I agree with you that if you have a really nasty decimal to multiply and the answers are really, really close together, then yes, you will need that calculator. However, a test taker's default mindset needs to be that there is another way to solve a problem without using the calculator. We have both taken these tests, the GRE, the GMAT, what have you, many times and experienced that stress that comes with being in timed conditions in the testing center with that clock ticking down.
Right.
Your default cannot be to go to the calculator. It has to be to think about what else you need. And before I bring up one of my examples, to respond to your second point that this is along the same lines, you were talking about how the calculator can keep you from making mistakes, and if you mess up, you can always just retype something in. Well, especially when under time conditions, we don't necessarily know if we've typed something in wrong. So it actually adds another layer of potential error in there instead of actually saving errors. So let me bring up my first example just to illustrate one of my points here. Let's say that we had started out with a really long, convoluted word problem, done a full 2 minutes of work already, and gotten to this very simple calculation at the end, 7 times 59. Looks relatively straightforward. But again, with that 9 at the end, chances are we'd want to pull out the calculator just to save ourselves a quick second. But look how far apart the answer choices are, and this is something we've certainly discussed in blogs, that estimation is a much better tool and will save you a lot of time over using that calculator. At that last step there, if the answer choices are spaced far apart. So in this case, 7 times 69 is very, very close to 7 times 60. So the correct answer has to be very close to 420, and in fact, there's only one thing that's even close. Answer choice C. Right?
So I agree with you.
Again, if this...
So it seems like what your main point is that critical thinking can be faster than the calculator, and I totally agree. But what I look at as a board gamer is the net difference. See, here, someone who's not going to see the critical thinking step, all they're going to do is basically type that into the calculator and lose a few extra seconds, which at the end of the day is not the biggest thing in the world. By contrast, in a scenario where there was really, really difficult arithmetic, the net difference between having to do it by hand or having a calculator that would just give you the answer straight up is much, much greater. So in those cases where the calculator hurts people, it's not going to hurt them very much. It's just going to hurt them for a few seconds of time, whereas when the calculator helps people, it makes a substantive difference in how well people are able to take on this test.
I still just have to very strongly disagree with you because, again, I was saying it depends. So let's pull up another example.
Sure.
To think through this a little bit here, because you were talking about critical thinking versus saving yourself some time. And at the end of the day, the critical thinking always has to come first. If test takers are not actively practicing critical thinking on every single practice problem that they do, then they're not going to apply it when they get to the real test. And you know what, maybe they won't even need to do the calculator because the arithmetic they'll see is really simple because they did poorly on the first quant section and got a really simple second section.
Okay.
Right? So we always need to be driving home that critical thinking. And this second example right here is just a quick quantitative comparison, and this is actually a very simplified version of a quiz bank problem that I saw. So quiz bank is a tool that our students use a lot.
Okay.
So you notice it's just 6 fractions added together. The real problem has, I believe, 20 fractions added together in each column. Wow. And I have worked with tutoring students who actually did pull out the calculator because I was making them do the problem timed. And this is people who were a week away from test day, by the way. This is not people who were just starting out their prep. They were so not panicked, but worried about how to begin approaching the problem that their first instinct was just to dive in and begin calculating, when in reality, critical thinking here allows us to do this problem without whipping out the calculator at all.
Okay.
Right? Because again, if you and I both look at this, we see that most of the fractions between the two quantities overlap, so we can completely ignore those and only look at the sums of the fractions that are individual to quantity A and quantity B. And again, the way these numbers work out, we can tell which one's going to be greater without even adding it. With some practice, we're not saying that critical thinking comes overnight, but that's how you overtake the competition, and that's how you get to that 166, 170 mark, is by avoiding the calculator as much as possible.
You know, it seems to me like at the end of the day our difference is somewhat philosophical, because I totally agree with you that, yeah, in that kind of a problem, if someone uses the calculator, then they're going to have a heck of a time compared to someone who uses critical thinking. But that's true even if the calculator didn't exist. If the calculator didn't exist, the student who lacks critical thinking would do the same exact thing, except they'd do the calculations by hand, and that would be even worse than doing them with the calculator. Basically, whoever doesn't have critical thinking, they're screwed no matter what. So it's kind of like saying that, you know, knowing the combinations formula makes the GRE harder for you, because then there are going to be problems where you're going to try to use it, and you really shouldn't use it on those problems. You should just use plain old factorial. Same thing with the calculator. Sure, there are going to be some times where you impale yourself on a stake by using the calculator instead of thinking critically, but all that means is that you weren't very well prepared. If you prepare well and you do study and read good explanations to problems and don't make the calculator your default, now you've got this really awesome tool that you never would have had before, and so it lets you go higher on the GRE than you would have been able to go otherwise. Now, we've hit the 5-minute mark a few seconds ago, so Teresa, I give you now the final word.
It looks like we did find our area of overlap right at the end there when you said as long as you don't make that calculator your default. Because to rephrase what you said, I encourage students to tackle the GRE and as if they don't even have a calculator. So again, it looks like we did find our area of overlap there. So we hope you enjoyed today's session. I'll turn it over to you for the actual close.
All right, thanks, Teresa. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the Kaplan GRE Grudge Match Volume 1. Let us know what you think in the comments if you want to see Volume 2 and so on. Otherwise, we'll see you here next time. Till then.